Hey everyone, it's Zach Wright from Imeo Company, improving management, employees, and organizations, where we focus on developing people, processes, and purposes for your organization. And in today's episode, I wanted to talk about why I created Imeo. And the real reason, I'll go into detail, but the real reason that I created Imeo is because I thought and know that there's a better way that we can operate as businesses and also operate as leaders and employees even. So that's the real reason. But I wanted to break it down into some of the things that I've gone through that really pushed me to venture out into creating my own company. So the first one is I've worked for a lot of different managers, and I've seen what's good and what's very bad, what you shouldn't do as a manager. And I learned that as an employee and as a business, really, you're affected by your manager. If they're good, then you have the capabilities to be innovative, creative, work on things that are going to grow yourself and grow the company at the same time. Now, if you work for a bad manager, then you're probably experiencing micromanagement where they're hovering over you constantly, or they're questioning things that you're doing. And what happens is you become a hermit. You stop speaking up in meetings. You stop being willing to take risk because of the potential consequences that you think will happen. So before I've gotten into the stage that I am in my career, a lot of the managers that I had have really fluctuated in their styles and their approaches and their effectiveness and the way that they treated me specifically, as well as the way that they treated the team. So the before I graduated college and really got into this passion of organizational psychology, I worked for managers ranging anywhere from a factory worker manager, where I was a roofer and we were building mobile homes, and I had to answer to a manager, and then I also had to answer to his manager. And it wasn't necessarily a bad experience, but I knew that that's not where I wanted to work forever. So I probably was a difficult employee, and I saw the way that they handled it. You know, there was an older gentleman that was a manager, my manager's manager, and he really treated you with respect, even if you were kind of outside of what you should have been doing or what you should have been saying. And I found that as positive, you know, because a lot of times we see on TV or we see in movies where bosses are, if you don't do it my way, then you got to leave, or you have to correct what you're doing, or you're going to be punished, right? But this manager really sat down with me and talked about certain things. And I thought that that was great. It was something new that I seen that I've never seen before at that stage. And I was probably about 23, and I've worked several jobs before that. So that kind of puts it into perspective how important good managers are and how important organizations should make that a requirement. So then I talked about the thesis paper, and the thesis paper was the happy, productive worker thesis. And that introduced me to Adam Grant, which is an organizational psychologist. And there were a lot of things in his studies that talked about how managers need to be trained appropriately, first of all, but then employees need to experience managerial support and managerial attention. And then another aspect of management, you need to be able to understand and be self aware enough that the decisions that you make as a manager are going to affect an employee in different ways. And you want to jump ahead of that, where most managers, they'll react without thinking about other people's reactions to their reaction, right? So that little piece of study made me dive deeper into other studies for the research paper or the thesis paper. And then I learned about Sean Aker. So this kind of goes more into positive psychology, where if you are experiencing a bad boss or a bad work environment, you have the capability as an individual, not even just an employee, as an individual, to course correct your happiness. So I've talked about this before, but there's 5 specific positive exercises that you can focus on to enhance your happiness. And then I started to think, and while I was carrying out this research, and there were tons of studies out there, empirical studies and peer-to-peer review studies and meta-analysis. And what I began to think about was, how can positive psychology and organizational psychology combine to work together to build the best team, to build the most satisfied team, to build the most effective team and the most productive team, right? And there are a lot of studies out there that we really go over in our Creating Culture That Works workshop. So if you want to learn more about that, reach out to us. We're ready to go into your organization and deliver that to you. It won't cost too much. We want to spread the word, right? That's why we created it. And so there's some other research out there that talks about positive affect and negative affect, which means um, if you are feeling a certain type of way, then you're more likely to be satisfied versus your trait, right? So if you have a trait, then you might be more negative than positive, whatever the case is. But these all tie into the the reason why I started Imeo, because I wanted people to first be educated on what's out there, because I was surprised whenever I was going through this. And like I said, around this time I might even been 25, right? So a quarter, let's say I live to 100, fingers crossed, a quarter of my life it took for me to do my own digging to understand that there are ways out there in which an organization can operate where they care about the people and also increase their profits as a result. So I know I probably rambled a little bit there, so let me get back on track. The thesis paper in the school introduced me to ways you can improve leadership and how organizations interact with their people, and how you can do certain things, specific things, to change the way they behave, to change the outcomes of the business, and so on and so forth. Now, this was kind of the naive part of me, right? I'm growing and I'm doing this thesis paper and I'm excited to take this into an organization, not really having any experience anywhere else, right? So at the time I was finishing my undergrad, I was still working in the operating room at, I'm actually wearing the shirt now, Carolinas Medical Center. It's now Atrium, but I was working there in the operating room, and I was I was an operating room assistant, which is really a glorified janitor. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but we're cleaning up surgery after surgery. So we're cleaning up the nasty stuff that people don't want to see. We're running specimens to the lab. We're doing all these things. And that particular leader, and whenever I talk about these leaders, I'm not bashing them. They all taught me something along the way. But this leader was more hands off, right? You could tell that he has been in the system for a long time, and he understood what you could do and what you couldn't do at that organization. And that organization is very bureaucratic. So you have to go through the hierarchy. You have to be at a certain level to really have your voice heard. And this was all before a new leader came in, but this manager kind of showed me certain things of what not to do. He didn't really communicate with the employees. He was very, not necessarily my way or the highway, but he would relay what was coming from his manager to us and kind of play the role of, well, that's what they said, so this is why we have to do it. Which doesn't motivate anybody. In a lot of cases, it makes the employees disengaged. It makes them not as satisfied or not as motivated to come to work. And I experienced that myself. Whenever I first started working there, I was willing to pick up double shifts, which is 16 hours a day, multiple times a week. But then once you see that the manager doesn't really stand up for you, they don't fight for you, or the organization doesn't really see you as a valued employee, then you stop being motivated. And I'm a high performer. I love work. I'm a workaholic. But if I am not cared for or recognized, and we all have our different twerks, right? So if I'm not recognized or cared for, or if my work doesn't seem like it's being impacted or impactful to other people, then I just can't motivate myself to take that extra step. I'll continue to be a high performer, but I won't work 16 hours a day, right? So that's another manager that taught me certain things, and he wasn't a bad person. I just don't think that they trained him appropriately, or what we see a lot is that dreams get broken because you get beaten down over and over and over again, or told that you're wrong and you're wrong, or you can't do this. It's you give up that hope of one day trying to change the world, right? And so being able to see those two types of managers, and they weren't perfect, right? No manager is ever perfect, but being able to compare and contrast those, it gave me an idea into, okay, the things that I'm learning in school, I can see this benefiting them. So I wanted to take, going back to the naivety, like I wanted to take my learning and tell my manager, like, hey, this is how we can get more people motivated, this is how we can do this. And they shut it down, right? Because it's different, or they know that it's just not going to go anywhere. So why would they put the time and effort in there? So that told me that I needed to get out and I needed to get a different job, which I knew I wasn't going to stay there forever. So I ended up finishing my thesis paper. I graduated from college and I started working at a staffing firm. And there's two types of managers here. So whenever I first onboarded at the IT staffing firm, I had a manager that was very hands off, very nonchalant, you could tell that she was tired of this position, right? She lost her enthusiasm probably because of the way that the company was ran, right? I mean, if you didn't hit your numbers, then you really got yelled at. And that's not an exaggeration. You got yelled at, physically yelled at, loud. Other people could hear it. So it just wasn't great. It wasn't a great environment. And then we had another manager come over who was actually a peer of mine. And I knew him and we had a good relationship. And he started to kind of pick up the culture. We started working on it together. I told him some of the ideas that I had from my thesis paper and some of the things that I've been reading in books and listening in podcasts. And he was a little bit more accepting, but he knew that the type of people that we had to go about it a certain way, right? But all along the time of me trying to get what I knew was out there and what I knew had been studied and proven time and time again, along that time, even whenever I would only get like a 20% yes, then I would implement that 20% and see it increase in the team. And then we could say, I could go back to that person and say, okay, well, we got this 20%. What about this? Maybe I get another 15 or another 20. And then we do that until we get all the way to 100. And the way that I was able to constantly be innovative and creative was I continued my research. It didn't just stop at the thesis paper. I continued at the research, and then I continued like YouTubing videos. That's why I want to put these things out here so somebody can run across this and say, I'm so glad that Imeo puts out these videos because it helps me as a person, as an individual, as a leader, as a company. That's one of the reasons that we do that, right? But I kept reading books, listening to podcasts, and my knowledge began to expand. And then my growth in the interest of the topic, organizational psychology, you can even call it organizational behavior or organizational science, whatever you want to call it, it continued to grow. And once I realized that this was going to be here for a long time, because I could tell in different stages of my life, I would get excited about something and then it would fall to the wayside, or I would get excited and then once I got beaten down a little bit, it would be like, okay, well, I'll keep that to myself or blah, blah, blah. But this, I kept focusing on it and it just always stuck there. And now, I mean, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see all the books behind me. Those are books that I read because of this passion, right? So anyway, we get to the next part of the next manager. So my peer became a manager, and then we needed a new director in this department. So we had an individual that was an internal candidate. Now we weren't part of this because they were above us, but we had somebody come over from the branch that they were working on and entering into the department that we were working on or working in. And it was a good thing, but a bad thing too, because this person had a bad reputation for just the way that he treated his employees. It's not that he was challenging, but it was that he was just not a good person, right? And I hate to say that because all good people have, or all people have some type of goodness in them. Um, but when he came over, he did the whole spiel of taking us out to breakfast, one-on-ones, like trying to get to know us, which is something that I full-heartedly believe in. You want to get to know your people. But then after a month went by, there started being some questions on certain things that just didn't make sense, in the sense of like, why are you doing this? Or why didn't you do it like that? Or the thing that really bugs me is whenever somebody comes into an organization with tons of years of experience and they say, well, I've done this for 14 years or 15, 13, 20 years. And like, why can't you do this? Or whatever the case is, they're trying to present themselves as higher than anybody else in that organization, right? So long story short on this one, because I could probably talk too long on this one, this manager was a bully boss, which I think is the worst type of boss that you can be, right? So rather than somebody who's hands off, like at least you'll get to understand how to create things on your own, because they're not going to tell you no. You can take risk. They're hands off. You get to learn and teach yourself. But with a bully boss, it's not just that they're micromanagers, it's that they specifically target areas to make you feel insecure or question your ability to perform tasks, right? So before this manager came over, I was a high performer. I met top performing quarters, quarter over quarter, year over year. And when this person came over, I began to get questioned, right? And at this time I got promoted to team lead, so I had a little bit of a team underneath me. I had one offshore recruiter, and then I had 5 recruiters underneath me, and we were starting to see improvements on those people. They gave me the lowest performers, and then they ended up being performers by the time that I left that company. But they started questioning me, and they started really bringing in certain things that just didn't add up. So the first red flag was they questioned me without hearing me out. So there was an account manager that I worked with, and they apparently they were working on this for a month or two, and almost like a legal defense, they were putting something against me. And one day before we had a happy hour event, they put a stack of papers like 2 inches thick, 3 inches thick, and they threw it down on the conference table and said, "Tell me about this." And I'm a very thorough person, so I read through all of it, and they got tired of waiting. So, but anyway, they questioned me, basically said that I was lying about a situation that happened. And the truth was that I wasn't lying, but they came in there with their mindset already made up, right? And they threatened to call the director's boss. And I said, go ahead, because I don't have anything to hide, right? At this time, I'm thinking, okay, they called me in here, they're going to fire me for whatever reason. Still a top performer, still the team lead, still helping other people improve and putting in extra work in on the weekends and after hours, right? Then the second flag was they removed me from the leadership meetings randomly, just randomly. So it used to be me, my manager, and then my manager's manager, where we would have management meetings and talk about the team, how to develop them, and so on and so forth, really strategy meetings. And randomly, they took me out of it without really telling me. So that was the second red flag. It was a little bit strange. They didn't want me to be involved. Now, I don't want to say this in a braggy way, but at the time I was getting my Lean Six Sigma certification, and then I was also getting my executive MBA, where one of the managers didn't have a degree, which that's not important to me, but I can see where someone might, if they're insecure, add that to the plate of, okay, this guy's getting more education than me, so I need to maybe take him down a notch. Same thing with the other manager. He had his bachelor's degree, and I was getting my degrees, right? So there might have been some threats there, and I hate saying that because I like to be self-aware and I like to say things that are truthful. And I asked the team around me, and I also talked to my close circle that I have for professional conversations, and that's what they thought as well. So I had enough people around me to, and they weren't just yes people. I had enough people around me to understand that what I was feeling was actually truthful, that I was being targeted in this situation. And so the third flag was we only communicated with me in one-on-one settings with no one else around. That is where a bully boss really stands out. So if you have a manager who only talks to you in your one-on-ones behind a closed door with no one else in there, and they say certain things that just don't really make sense, and those things are putting you down or making you question your work ability, but it doesn't add up, then that is a huge red flag. That's whenever I began to realize, like, okay, this is not normal, right? I know that my work ethic and my performance have not gone down at all. I even did a 3 month analysis, a 6 month analysis, and a month over month analysis to make sure before I go into these conversations, understanding the facts. Was my performance really dropping, or was that something that they were saying to make me question my ability? And it turned out that my performance stayed the same. I was still in that top performing route, while also, which is the fifth red flag. So I'll go out a little bit of order, but well, actually, fourth red flag: question my work ethic without any question or without any changes in performance, right? And then I also had additional tasks on my plate. So that is another huge red flag. The third, fourth, and then the fifth red flag all go together. So the fifth red flag, they put me on critical performance while I was maintaining my performance and improving my team's performance, right? So my performance stayed high, and then my team performance started to reach performing level where before they weren't performing at all. So third, fourth, and fifth red flag really is the keys of a bully boss. So first, they only talk to you whenever you're behind closed doors, so nobody can hear what they're saying to you, and they can be as rude, as mean, whatever as possible, make you question yourself. And then they make you question your work ethic, even though there's not changes that is happening, right? Whatever the reason, I don't understand. I still don't understand. I don't let it get by me, but or I don't let it take me down. But I like to share this story because if you're in this situation, you need to have a critical plan on how to exit that or transition into another department. For me, what I did was I brought in the SVP of Human Resources. She's actually now the CHRO of that company. And whenever I brought her in, she handled it with respect and the care that it needed to. But whenever she started talking to them, they had no idea that I was even talking to her, right? So that's whenever they started to kind of change their tone a little bit, like, oh no, like we got HR involved, so now we kind of have to toll it back a little bit, right? And then the CHRO actually got the the manager involved, and they were both on my side. They didn't understand what was the reason in them questioning my work ability, my efforts, my passion in the company, and all those things. So with that being said, before I actually left, this was 6 months in the making. Before I left, I had a strategy. I already started interviewing elsewhere, but I wanted to talk to HR to see if there was any way that I transitioned, because I enjoyed the company and the people, but it just didn't make any sense for me to be questioned every single day and question myself, right? So, long story short on is this is the worst type of manager that you can be. And I saw it personally that I was experiencing something that the studies suggested would happen. So if you have a boss that does not respect you, does not take the right approaches to the way that people operate in their business, even the high performers will become demotivated, will become disengaged, actively disengaged. And what the thing that a lot of people don't understand about this is it goes back to the metaphor of like one bad apple can spoil the bunch. I probably messed that up, but I can say personally, as an employee who was going through this, I took time away from other people. It was subconscious at the time, but looking back, I can see that as I was going through this, I was talking to the people around me to understand if they were feeling the same way. And they were feeling the same way. So it wasn't just me at this point, it was the entire team. And once I left the company, they had a lot of people leave as well. Now, some people stayed, and I honestly feel bad for them, but it seems like they're doing well. So that's good. But it, it it proved to me that if you don't implement these things that I've studied in my thesis paper and then really my life's work up to this point, then you're going to lose people. You're going to have higher turnover, higher absenteeism. You're going to have lower productivity because people are going to be disengaged. And even worse, they're going to be actively disengaged. And then that spreads to other team members. So going back to the original thought here is the reason I created Imeo was to ensure that nobody ever has to feel the wrath of a bully boss and question themselves. I also started it because I know that we spend most of our waking hours at work, and it is a given right, a human right, to enjoy what you do. And if your company or your boss is not allowing you to live that type of life, then I think that is a critical issue that you need to focus on improving, or you need to leave that company. So the real reason that I started Imeo, it falls into our mission and vision. We want to build a world where organizations operate effectively and treat others appropriately. That's our whole thing. And that's what we do for our clients. So I know that this is a really long video, and I know it's just me talking, but I hope that some of it made sense. I hope that when you watch this, if you're experiencing a bully boss, if you are in an organization and you feel like you can improve your culture or your leadership, but you just don't know how, please reach out to me. You can reach out to me at zwright, at imeoconsulting.com, or you can find us on the web at imeocompany.com or any of our social media platforms. But thanks so much for watching. And like I said, I hope this resonates with you, or actually, I hope it doesn't resonate with you. But if it does, please reach out to us. You can hopefully clearly tell the passion that we have here. Um, and a lot of the things that I mentioned about the studies and what we've learned and how we can put it into practice is found in our Creating Culture That Works workshop. So if you want us to come in and present that to your team, or if you want us to help your team develop better training for your leadership team, reach out to us. Again, thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.